Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I want to share a story that's a little different. It's not something I found in an old book or on some obscure corner of the internet. This is a story from my own family. A story my grandmother told me about my grandfather. It's a story I've carried with me for years, and it still sends a chill down my spine every time I think about it. The title isn't clickbait. This is the story of how my grandfather fought the devil. My grandparents lived in a small, isolated house deep in the countryside. The kind of place where the nearest neighbor is a mile away and the nights are so dark you can almost feel the blackness pressing in on you. My grandfather, Thomas, was a man of the earth, strong, quiet, and not prone to flights of fancy. He'd seen a lot in his life, and very little scared him. But what happened one autumn, back in the late 60s, changed him forever. It started subtly. Strange noises at night, scratching at the door when no one was there. The sound of footsteps on the gravel driveway when the yard was empty. At first, they dismissed it. Old houses creak, the wind plays tricks. But then things escalated. Tools would go missing from his workshop, only to reappear in bizarre places, like on the roof or in the middle of the field. A cold spot developed in the hallway, a patch of air so frigid it would steal your breath, even on a warm day. My grandmother was terrified, but my grandfather, stubborn as he was, refused to be intimidated in his own home. He was a practical man, and he looked for a practical explanation. He checked for drafts, set traps for animals, and even stayed up all night with his old shotgun, expecting to catch some local kids playing a prank. But he never found anything. The disturbances only grew worse. The air in the house became heavy, oppressive, filled with a sense of being watched. My grandmother said she'd wake up in the middle of the night to see a tall, shadowy figure standing in the corner of their bedroom, a silhouette of a man who was just wrong. It had no discernible features, just an outline of pure, solid darkness. She would squeeze her eyes shut, and when she'd opened them again, it would be gone. She begged my grandfather to call the local priest, but he wouldn't hear of it. "I'll handle this myself," he'd say, his jaw set. The turning point came on a Tuesday night. A storm was rolling in, the sky bruised purple and black. My grandfather had just come in from securing the barn when he found my grandmother in the kitchen, white as a sheet, pointing at the wall. There, etched into the plaster as if by a searing finger, was a singular, strange, twisted mark he didn't recognize. Put, and underneath it, a single word, "Mine." That was the moment my grandfather's stubbornness turned into cold fury. This thing, whatever it was, had threatened his wife. It had invaded his home and claimed it. He looked at my grandmother, his face grim, and said, "All right. If it wants a fight, it'll get one." He wasn't a particularly religious man, not in the church every Sunday kind of way. But he was raised on old-world beliefs, on stories of good and evil being tangible forces. He believed in God, and he certainly believed in the opposite. He went to his study and took down the old family Bible, a massive leather-bound book passed down through generations. He also grabbed a small pouch of salt and a silver crucifix his mother had given him. He told my grandmother to lock herself in the bedroom and not to come out, no matter what she heard. He said, "Pray for me, Sarah. Pray hard." As the storm broke outside, the house fell deathly silent. The rain hammered against the windows, and the wind howled like a hungry wolf. My grandfather stood in the center of the living room, the Bible in one hand, the crucifix in the other. He began to read aloud from the Psalms, his voice strong and steady, a challenge echoing through the unnatural quiet of the house. For what felt like an hour, nothing happened, just the storm and the sound of his voice. He started to think maybe he'd been a fool. Then the main door, which was bolted shut, flew open with a deafening crash, slamming against the wall. A blast of wind and rain tore through the house, extinguishing the lamps and plunging the room into near total darkness, save for the flashes of lightning. And in the doorway, a figure stood. It wasn't the simple shadow my grandmother had described. This was a man. He was tall and dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that seemed to shed the rain, not a drop touching it. His face was handsome, almost perfect, but his eyes glowed with a faint reddish light, like embers in a dying fire. He smiled, a cold, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thomas," the man said, his voice smooth and cultured, yet carrying an ancient power that made the floorboards vibrate. "You've been a poor host. It's rude to ignore a guest." He took a step inside, and the cold spot from the hallway seemed to follow him, expanding until the entire room was freezing. My grandfather's heart was pounding, but he stood his ground. He raised the crucifix. "You are not welcome here. This is a house of God. Leave this place." The man chuckled, a low, mocking sound. "A house of God. This is a house of wood and nails, a house of fear, and fear is my domain. Your wife knows. I've been visiting her in her dreams. Such lovely, terrified dreams. Rage, pure and hot, surged through my grandfather. He took a step forward, his voice booming over the storm. "You will not speak of my wife. You will not set foot in my home. In the name of God, I command you to leave." The man's smile vanished. His handsome features seemed to flicker and warp, the illusion momentarily dropping to reveal something truly monstrous beneath a face of shifting shadows and burning hatred. "You command nothing, old man," he hissed, his voice losing its smoothness and becoming a guttural snarl. The lights flickered violently, and a painting flew off the wall, shattering on the floor. But my grandfather didn't flinch. He just started reading from the Bible again, louder this time, his faith a shield against the palpable evil in the room. He walked a slow circle, sprinkling a line of salt on the floor, creating a barrier. The man in the suit watched him, his expression a mask of contempt. "Do you really think your farmer's superstitions can stop me?" "It's not superstition," my grandfather declared, closing the salt circle. "It's faith." As he finished the circle, the entity let out a roar of frustration. It lunged forward but stopped short, as if hitting an invisible wall right at the salt line. It snarled, its eyes blazing with fury. "You cannot keep me out forever, mortal. This house is mine. This family is mine. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. The entity threw everything it had at him. The furniture shook, the windows rattled, and terrifying whispers echoed from every corner, speaking of my grandfather's deepest fears and failures. But he never stopped. He just kept reading, his voice raw, pouring every ounce of his will and belief into the words. He prayed not just for protection, but for strength, for deliverance. Finally, as the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, the entity began to weaken. The storm outside was fading, and so was its power. With one last desperate shriek of pure hatred that shook the very foundations of the house, the figure dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, which was then violently sucked out of the open doorway and into the receding darkness. Silence. The only sounds were the gentle dripping of the rain and my grandfather's own ragged breathing. He stood there, exhausted, in the center of his salt circle, until the sun was fully up. He unbolted the bedroom door. My grandmother was huddled on the floor, rosary beads clutched in her hands, her face tear-streaked. They just held each other for a long time. They never spoke of it again in detail, but the event left its mark. The house felt clean, peaceful, but my grandfather was forever changed. He became more thoughtful, quieter, and he never missed a Sunday service again. That family Bible always sat on the mantelpiece, open to Psalm 91. That's the story. A testament to how sometimes the most terrifying monsters are real, and the only weapon you have is your own courage and faith. What do you think? Do you have any family stories like this? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. It really helps the channel out. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.